USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from US College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. An in-depth look at this week's top college hockey matchup and a preview of the other big games.
Welcome to USCHO's Game of the Week podcast for Thursday, February 4th, 2021. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Our highlighted game this week pits two of the top teams in the WCHA, number 6, Minnesota State, and number 8, Bowling Green State University.
And joining us to preview the series between Minnesota State and Bowling Green, Minnesota State's head coach. That's Mike Hastings. Mike, it's a strange year, but your team just seems to be chugging along as usual. I know there was a bump in the road with a loss last week, but that was your first loss since the second game of the season. How do you see your team is playing right now, and how has the season gone for you?
Well, first of all, guys, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And in today's world, you're trying to just be as flexible as you can. And for us, I hate to say this in February, but we're still trying to learn about our team. We've played a total of 12 games. We got off to a decent start and then put together a pretty good string of if you're talking the wins and loss column on the win side, but we had a lot of stops and starts in between. So trying to figure out how to manage a weekend where 2 weeks in a row you go back to back. The last time we had that, it worked out pretty well. Because of the pandemic, we ended up playing an extra game with Bemidji this last weekend because we had lost 2 games with Huntsville, and we're still trying to learn a little bit about our club, but we've had some young guys step up into roles that were vacated by some juniors and seniors that had good careers while they were here, and we're going to need those guys to continue to do that with some solid goaltending from a guy named Dryden McKay.
Well, and I'll start right there with you, Mike. And anybody that has watched your team over the last 3 years understands that you have one of the best goaltenders in the country in Dryden McKay, and a good defense, a very solid defense in front of him. You're not allowing too many shots a game, but when you have a guy like Dryden McKay back there, how secure can it make a coach feel? I assume the heartburn level stays down a little bit when you have a guy that puts forth save percentages north of .950 every year.
Yeah, you know what? Good goaltenders make better coaches. That's for sure. So Dryden has been a backstop for us now, going on his third year, and I guess he gives you a comfort as a coach. I think as a player, he gives you confidence into, sometimes you try as a coach to develop an environment where you don't want guys worried about making mistakes. And I think Dryden pours into that. If you make a mistake, Dryden more often than not is there to cover up the mistake. It doesn't go up on the scoreboard, and it allows us to continue to play. So I just think his demeanor, whether it's in the weight room, whether it's in the locker room, or whether it's on the ice, really doesn't change. And it's been a comfort to have a goaltender that doesn't have a lot of peaks and valleys in his game. And he's been as consistent as a guy that I've ever had in my coaching career, and hopefully he can continue with that.
I started to mention when asking about McKay, the defense, looking at just the statistical part of it, and I know that stats don't always tell the story, but, your team has limited your opponents. I guess there was one game against Bemidji State where the Beavers got 27 shots back in mid-December, but I look at some of these totals of saves at 14, 11, 16, 19. So I feel like there's probably a pretty good commitment to team defense as well.
Yeah, I think Dryden would be the first one, and it's interesting when he's asked about his numbers. He's a very selfless young man. He points to the groups that are playing in front of him. And, one way that we try to sell as coaches the idea of being able to be good defensively is if you do it well, you don't have to do it a lot. Trying to possess the puck as much as possible. and trying to play in groups of 5 when we're even strength, whether that's in our end in the neutral zone or in the offensive zone. And if you have the puck, it's a lot more enjoyable game to play, and it's sellable as a coach to your group that if you're possessing the puck and holding on to it, you don't have to defend. And so I think our group's done a really good job. I've been fortunate with my recruiting coordinator, Todd Connaught. He's done a good job at recruiting guys that are okay buying into the we game instead of the me game. And I think that's poured on. When we're successful, it's when we have everybody, committing to the idea of if we don't have it, we've got to do everything we can to go get it. And if we get it, let's do everything we can to keep it.
I look at the other side of the puck, the offense, and I guess when you don't allow too many goals, the 6 shutouts in the year thus far, you don't have to score too many. But you have 17 different guys have put the puck in the net through 12 games. Nobody with more than 6. It feels like there's some balance in what's going on up front.
Yeah, we've been fortunate with that too. Very lucky in the idea that we've had different guys in different spots. I'll use an example. Our leading scorer, Cade Borchardt, a year ago played 10 games for us. Now that tells you how bright his coach was at evaluating his talent. As a freshman, should have probably been given more opportunity. But he's come in, and with the opportunity being different than it was a year ago, he's leading our team, with 15 points. So he's come in and made an impact immediately. And then we've got a line that's been very effective for us recently in Walker Dewar, who's a senior, Jared Spooner, who's a senior. And we've got a group that together, they are heavy, hard to play against. And when you can have depth throughout your lineup where you can put them out and not worry about what's going to happen defensively, and they can contribute offensively, it allows you to play at a pace that I think benefits us. So when we can go deep into our lineup at rolling 4 lines and being able to utilize 5 or 6 defensemen, I think it makes a tougher matchup.
We're talking with Minnesota State head coach Mike Hastings. At the beginning, you mentioned some of the delays and postponements, even cancellations, last-minute rescheduling. It even affects daily routines. How have you been able to keep some sense of normality through all this for your team?
Oh, boy, kind of daily just dealing with it. And what I mean by that is just trying to communicate. I think one of the biggest hurdles from our coaching staff, and I'd have to believe all coaching staffs, is one thing that's been eliminated over the pandemic is your ability to have face-to-face and having the contact that you're used to and building the relationships so that when there are the valleys instead of the peaks, you talk about it. So ours is just trying to communicate with our guys, be up front, let them maybe see the window quicker, communicate more on, guys, it's okay us telling them we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Here's what our options are going to be. And when we get up tomorrow, we'll talk about those and find out which option serves us best. And I think that's been about as good of a plan that we've had on just trying to communicate with the guys while they're going through this, because we're learning as coaches. We haven't been through this before. The last time in last March, when we thought it was going to be okay by, next year, it isn't. So we're still learning and going about it day by day. We lean on our leadership group because we've got some older guys where we benefit from that. And so we try to lean on them as much as we can and communicate and try to take things as they come and deal with them as quick as we can and move on.
It probably has meant a lot more practice time for the team. Have you had to adapt some things in that area just to not get worn out or burned out with so much practice?
Yeah, I think if you ask that leadership group, they've seen enough of me to last 2 years as far as the practice time. Yeah, we've tried to build in more of quote unquote their days, less time with myself and try and do some different things, whether it's a split day where half will go on one day and half will go on the next and build in an off day for a group. more positionally, and just doing things and delivering the message differently, whether that's through our practice plans or in the off time. But yeah, they're tired of practicing right now. The more opportunity we have to play games, you see the energy level grow. And that's something as coaches we're still adapting to, because our practices Monday through Thursday just haven't been what maybe they were previously. And I think that's more on us than it is on the players.
Mike, might as well talk about the game that we're here to talk about, and it's this week's series against Bowling Green, a very big series in the WCHA. There's still plenty of hockey left to play, but when you look at the standings right now, your team and Bowling Green separated by just 2 points in the standings, really percentage points in the overall percentage of points earned. What do you know about this team? This is the only time you'll face them in the regular season this year. But obviously, Bowling Green's had a good record. But what do you see when you watch them on tape?
Well, first of all, they're prepared. Ty and his staff do a tremendous job. They're veteran laden, with 3 seniors right out of the gate. That I don't know how he feels about our upperclassmen, but I think these guys have been at BG for about 8 years. It seems. I'm tired of watching them go up and down the ice when we're playing them, but they're very good players. Brandon Cruz, Cameron Wright, Connor Ford, that group of forwards, all 3 of them are close to 100 points. I know 2 of them are over 100. I think Cameron Wright's he's chasing that right now. They've got elite defensemen. Will Cullen, I think, is putting together close to a point a game season. I think he plays that they talk about a 200-foot game. He's a threat all the time. And then the rest of their decor have just continued to get better. TJ Lloyd's at double digits. Theo Cardis is at double digits. And then both goaltenders are, they're batting about .930 apiece. So you combine that with a hunger, I think, as a program and a group, and that's a hard out. So we're going to have to be as good as we've been this year to compete against Bowling Green when they're coming into our building. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to judge ourselves because Bowling Green, you look what they did when, I've been to Quinnipiac before. It's hard to win out there, and BG went out and won twice. So we'll have our hands full, but we're excited about the opportunity to be competing against Bowling Green this weekend at home.
Well, Mankato will be the place that a lot of eyes are watching this weekend. It will be Bowling Green traveling to Mankato for 2 games against Minnesota State. Mike Hastings, always great to catch up with you. It's been a great season thus far. We wish you the best of the luck and best of health the rest of the season. And hopefully we'll be talking to you as we get toward the postseason as well.
All right, guys, take care. Jim, thanks. Ed, thank you for having me, and you guys stay safe, and hopefully not a lot of ill weather your way, and hopefully we can get to a point of a national tournament being held and everybody just staying as safe as they possibly can. Thanks for your time.
That's Minnesota State's Mike Hastings. More of the Game of the Week podcast coming right up.
This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from US College Hockey Online.
This is the Game of the Week podcast from USCHO.com. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Jim, this is going to be a great matchup between these 2 schools. And as you dig into the numbers, you find that they are very close on some things. Obviously, Dryden McKay, probably the leading candidate or one of the top 3 for the Mike Richter Award. A .90 goals against average and a .954 save percentage and 6 shutouts on the season. But the goaltending duo for Bowling Green, Zach Rose, 1.51 goals against, 2.09 for Eric Dopp. Both of them just decimal points apart with .930 save percentages. And that's reflected in some other numbers, too. Bowling Green has been terrific offensively. 4 goals per game is their average. Minnesota State just under 3.5. Minnesota State giving up a 1.25 goals per game, 1.90 for Bowling Green. This is one of those situations where you have strong offensive teams that are also strong defensive teams with great goaltending, and you got to wonder where something is going to give.
You certainly do. And, if there might be a place that you can look for it, it might be an intangible like motivation. Minnesota State, They were supposed to play 2 against Alabama Huntsville last weekend. That gets canceled. Instead, they throw Bemidji State, a red-hot Bemidji State team, onto their schedule for a single game. They lose it. And so I think that if you're looking for some motivation, there you can find some. You've got a Bowling Green team that's coming off of 2 wins. So I really feel that both of these teams have some of the big intangibles. They both have fantastic defenses, both getting unbelievable goaltending numbers. Obviously, Dryden McKay, as you mentioned, probably he's my kind of focal point right now for the Mike Richter Award. His numbers are just phenomenal. I thought he had those similar numbers last year, but Jeremy Swayman just was a standout that you couldn't overlook. So I feel like you have a lot of the components for both of these teams to be the best team in the conference. This is the weekend that it plays out. It's there's so many weeks left. I get 5 weeks left. Most teams in the country have 10 or more games still to play in their regular season. But this feels like it could be the defining series for the final season of the WCHA. I mean, this really is likely going to decide a regular season champion or will have a major influence, particularly if one team sweeps. So really big series. As you mentioned, great numbers, both sides. Which team is going to blink?
And, we mentioned Dryden McKay for the Richter, but I would not be surprised to see him at least as a Hobey Baker finalist, if not a hat trick member, and mainly because he's got numbers that are comparable to what Ryan Miller had as a sophomore at Michigan State in 2001. A save percentage and a goals against in the same area. Not 10 shutouts, but 6 in a much shorter season. Those are dominating numbers. And granted, there was no Richter Award back in 2001, but you got to think that he's going to be right up there even for the Hobey. I wonder if we might even see somebody win both. It would not be unjustified.
It wouldn't be unjustified. It would be unprecedented. And as much as I love the Richter Award, and I think it's a good award for college hockey because goaltenders just don't get that same recognition as a goal scorer, it has made it almost impossible for a goaltender to win the Hobey Baker. There's always somebody out there that you can somehow justify to give the award to instead of a goaltender. This is a strange year. We keep mentioning that pretty much at least once a week, maybe 3, 4, 5 times a week when we do these podcasts. And maybe in a strange year, you get a strange circumstance and people really look at the goaltender, in this case, Dryden McKay, as something that's a little different in a year like this. Consistency, I think, for goaltenders can be very difficult. When you're not playing games, you have stops and starts. Oftentimes it's very difficult to just get a rhythm. And we know that goaltenders usually are mental cases, and rhythm is usually a big part of it, and making sure that they get their opportunities to get out in competitive situations. So I think you can definitely justify, if McKay keeps numbers going like he has, you definitely can justify why he would be a Hobey hat trick or possibly a Hobey winner.
Somebody else who's going to be in that conversation is defenseman David Ferentz of BU with 14 points in a very small sample size of 6 games. But number 15 BU is going to have a home-and-home series in Hockey East with number 1 BC. This was put off for a couple of weeks due to COVID rescheduling. This is it seems to me there's something to lose in the overall picture of standings and poll for BC, and not a whole lot to lose for BU, and maybe a chance for them to make a big statement.
Certainly a big chance for a gain here for the Terriers. They've been wanting to get going here. They keep hitting having to hit the pause button. They started later than anybody. They were the 51st of 51 teams to get their season underway. They've only played 6 games, but they've, after a tough loss to open the season where they didn't look great, look like a team that hadn't played a game yet. They've really gotten on track, and their offense is scoring goals. You mentioned David Ferentz from the back end. He's a true offensive defenseman. And they're getting good goaltending. Drew Comesso right now, we didn't get to see him at World Juniors as a lot of people thought we would. Now that he's having a chance to get onto the big stage, he's performing well. BC is kind of the opposite side, they have a lot to lose in this series. They hope that they can prove that they are worthy of the number one ranking that they've held on to for a couple of weeks now. But any type of a blemish here, they'll probably drop out depending on what happens. But I'm hearing a lot of push for Minnesota, the way that they're playing right now. The fact that they've played a lot more games than many other conferences, that they deserve to be number one. We'll see. But BC has to probably win these two games if they're really going to cement themselves and put their stake in the ground that they're the number one team in the country.
UConn is a team that has been on the rise. We talked earlier this week to their head coach, Mike Cavanaugh. They got off to a bit of a slow start and have been pretty hot since about the semester break. They've got 2 single games, both on the road. They're at number 14 Northeastern and next week at number 20 UMass Lowell. UMass Lowell is coming off a pair of thumpings at the hands of UMass, so it's a big game for them. But for UConn, this may be their chance to, as hard as it is to move into the poll, it may be a chance for them with a successful couple of games.
I think so. And, I feel like they're one good win away from being a nationally ranked team. And that win could come in their single game at Northeastern this weekend. Northeastern has looked like an up and down team. They get the business done oftentimes. And, that's I don't want to make it seem like a backhanded compliment, but they win games sometimes when they don't perform to their best. They have had some injuries in net. We haven't seen Devin Levi in net this year. He was obviously with the Canadian World Junior team, missed a lot of games that way, but got injured at the end of that tournament. Hasn't gotten into the lineup yet for Northeastern, and then their backup goaltender Murphy gets injured in their last game out. So you're in one of these situations now where I don't know who will be playing this weekend. I don't know the health of either goaltender. I haven't had a chance to talk to Jim Madigan, but if goaltending becomes an issue for them, that's a big deal. You've got to have somebody in between the pipes that was your top 1 or top 2 goaltenders coming into this season. Curtis Fry, give him all the credit that he'll come in. He's a senior, but he has not played much in terms of his entire career. Connor Murphy's the guy that you really need to be out there, at least trying. And if Devin Levi can come back, I don't know where he is injury wise. That would be the most ideal situation. But that's a big question mark right now for Northeastern.
Northeastern also has a game next Tuesday against number 10 UMass.
And it's just kind of further it puts an exclamation point on the fact that you're going to hopefully have one of your top 2 goaltenders healthy by then. And UMass, they have an embarrassment of riches in net with Philly Lindbergh, carrying the water right now. He's only allowed 2 goals in his last 4 games. Just had a feature up on that pairing at UMass this morning. So this Northeastern is in a kind of a dire situation right now. And this weekend weekend plus a few days will really kind of let us know where the Huskies are.
When we turn to the Big Ten, the premier matchup in that league is number 11 Wisconsin and number 2 Minnesota. The Badgers, when they have a complete roster and when they're healthy, are a pretty formidable opponent. And Minnesota, only a little bump in the road a couple of weeks ago. You mentioned before about BC and the number 1 position, depending on what happens in that, or even if it is a good weekend for BC, what Minnesota does this weekend against Wisconsin will certainly impact that. And this may be a chance for Tony Granado's Badgers to leap into the top 10 with a successful weekend.
No doubt. I kind of, I know that Minnesota, they want to, get a couple of wins here, really solidify the top spot in the Big Ten. But if you're Wisconsin, you're healthy, you have your kids back from World Juniors, you've been playing very well of late. Everything seems to be going your way. Now you have this game this weekend on your schedule that is monumental. And this is the one you've been waiting for. You want to get a crack at the top team. You want to get a crack at the team that everybody's been talking about. And with a relatively healthy, I believe, Wisconsin team, this is a tilt. This is probably one of the better tilts of the weekend, and obviously it is the marquee matchup in the Big Ten.
Well, let's look at the NCHC. One series really stands out, and there are some teams off this weekend, but one that stands out to us is number 9 Omaha at Denver. Denver without a ranking since for the first time since the preseason poll back in 2014. This has been a rocky road for a Denver team that is much better than their record would suggest. It just in this weird year, they've had to play some really tough opponents along the way, including in the bubble, as they're playing all in the NCHC. So they haven't had the non-league games to help out with the schedule. But on the other hand, Omaha just keeps getting better and better. This is going to be a big weekend for the Pioneers.
It is, and because their series last weekend with Colorado College wasn't played, you end up 4 straight games basically against Omaha for this Denver team, and the last game they played was a 5-2 loss up at Omaha on January 24th. So now they'll see a very familiar opponent on home ice this time. I don't know how much that matters, but we see Omaha every week, and we've talked to their coach Mike Hastings, and I feel like we're seeing a very good Omaha team that, as you said, just keeps improving. And you want to make a statement, but if you're Denver, that statement probably comes off of that stat that you reeled off right at the beginning. They haven't been an unranked team in a very long time, and I think they probably. Coaches sometimes say polls are for fans, polls are for media, but trust me, coaches watch where they are on the national rankings. So knowing that they are unranked, they probably want to make some sort of a statement, a couple of wins or a win and a shootout win or an overtime win, whatever it might be, to get a few, 4, 5, 6 points out of this weekend would be really important for the Pioneers.
In a year without a pairwise ranking, every little bit of data, whether it's subjective or objective, will be considered, I'm sure, by the NCAA committee, and where people are in the polls is going to have to at least be in the back of their minds. So, yeah, I think that polls are taking a little bit more prominence this time around. Well, let's look at the ECAC, just 4 teams in that league, both ranked teams against unranked opponents. St. Lawrence is at number 12, Quinnipiac, and number 13, Clarkson, is at Colgate. The advantage would have to be for those ranked teams, but both St. Lawrence and Colgate have been improved teams this year and could steal one in both of these series.
St. Lawrence is the team I really have my biggest eye on. The fact that they are just 2 points out of first place, Quinnipiac and Clarkson both sitting there with 4, 3, and 3 marks. They balance everything out in overtime wins, overtime losses, shootouts. So they both have 17 points, but there's St. Lawrence right there with 15 points. And Colgate really isn't that far behind. This is a real jumble of a league. So it does feel that every time, the 4 teams take the ice, there's so much to prove. So I look at both of these as great series this weekend. I think that if there's a team that's trying to prove something this weekend, it's St. Lawrence. So that is the better of probably the 2 matchups in terms of what we're looking at. But Quinnipiac, Clarkson, they're just trying to take care of business. They both know that if they kind of keep their head down, win their games, maybe it comes down to a point or a tiebreaker toward the end of the season that gives you the overall first place in the league. And nobody really cares about that. It's whether they can make the NCAA tournament. If you're going to make your case for the tournament, you can't have that many slip-ups down the stretch. And
that's going to wrap things up for this week's edition of the Game of the Week podcast. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Game of the Week podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit USCHO.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.